Hi, in this week's video, we're going to unpack and talk about the 3 PPP forgiveness forms that are available. As of about a week or two ago, the Treasury provided us the PPP 3508S forgiveness form. So that brings the total amount of PPP forgiveness forms we have available up to 3. And so I want to go through each one of those very quickly and talk about the context for which one to use in your specific situation. And it should be pretty straightforward. So again, we've got the PPP 3508S, the PPP 3508EZ, and then the original PPP 3508. Now, here on the next page, what you can see is a flow chart that gives us an ability to identify which one's going to be appropriate for our needs. The PPP 3508S form is designed for individuals who receive $50,000 or under in the PPP loan program. So that seems like a nice, straightforward approach to use if you fit within that constraint of $50,000 or under. But I do want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what are those documentation requirements, because they're a little bit more extensive than what we have in the EZ form, or really even in the original form, depending on the costs that we're going to be claiming, as well as depending on the exception that we're going to look, which for the dental industry is going to provide the opportunity for the vast majority for you to use the EZ form. So again, on this flow chart, 50,000 and under, you can use the S form. If you've got a business activity disruption, if you're a self-employed independent contractor or sole proprietor with no employees, or if you had no reduction in the salaries or number of hours worked by your staff, then you can use that EZ form. If you don't hit any of those 4 categories so far that we've discussed, then you're kind of brought into the original PPP 3508. Now, again, with the dental industry, the vast majority are going to be able to claim the business disruption exemption and to utilize the EZ form. So let's talk about what each one of these forms entail. So here's a quick snapshot of the 3508S form. Most important thing to note here, you don't have to put in any financial information whatsoever. So it is a single-page forgiveness application available if you're $50,000 or under in your loan amount. No calculations are required, but the documentation remains. As you go through, you must certify that you had 60% of costs go into payroll, that all of those payroll costs are eligible, so keep in mind you cannot include the employer portion of federal taxes, and the self-employed or owner restrictions remain as well. If you're claiming an 8-week period, that's $15,385. If you're claiming the 24-week period, owners cannot seek more than $20,833 for forgiveness. And that all costs claimed are eligible for forgiveness. So kind of pretty straightforward in terms of its certifications. You also don't have to do the full-time equivalency worksheet. We're not going to have those types of reductions in there. But the important aspect of it, the EZ form, the 3508 EZ form and the 3508 original form, both have notes in their guiding document that says if you are not reporting a cost for forgiveness, then you don't have to justify that cost. What that does is that allows us to eliminate the document retention that we need to do. That doesn't exist in the 3508S. So while it looks nice and straightforward in terms of we don't have to do any math, keep in mind you are going to have to provide all of your payroll costs. You are going to have to provide proof of payment if you paid anything into retirement accounts, if you paid into health insurance accounts. You're going to have to retain your mortgage interest statement, so your amortization statements, or your rent or lease payment statements, and your business utility payments, both for the covered period and for February of 2020, because of that's where we're going to be making the comparison in terms of what's the forgivable amount. Now, once you put all those documents together, it's probably going to be well in excess of the PPP loan that you received. So using the S form likely going to have you retaining more documentation and submitting more documentation than you would have to if you used the EZ form. But again, there is no math required. So those are the documents to submit that I just talked about. Documents to retain for the S you're going to have to retain basically every document that's associated with the PPP loan. So the application, correspondence you received from your bank, certification of eligibility, as well as all the documents that you submit for forgiveness. So then we move to the EZ form. And so what you can see here in the EZ form, like now we have this section here where we are supposed to fill out certain financial information. Remember that note though, that we don't have to justify costs that we're not seeking forgiveness for. So that EZ form, short application form, it's a 2-pager, one with some pretty straightforward math on the front of it, and then the second is those certifications again. That restricted use, sole proprietors, independent contractors with no employees, no change to salary, staff, or wages paid, or we had a business activity disruption. So we will be able to claim that business activity disruption because, our practices were disrupted. When we do that, then we don't have to worry about the other two. So as long as we weren't reducing our staff's hourly wage, but we did reduce the number of hours that they worked, we're still good to use this form. This form does exclude that full-time equivalency calculation, which is that one's a bear. That one's a good one to be avoiding if we can do it in an appropriate way. And this one allows for that streamlined documentation requirements to maintain. We only need to justify what we're asking for forgiveness, and we don't have to fill out costs that we're not seeking forgiveness for. As I've been working with clients to fill out this EZ form, the vast majority of dental practices are able to have the entirety of their PPP loan forgiven in what is in line 1, payroll costs. If we can justify the entire amount of our PPP loan with our cash compensation to staff, that will limit the document retention that we have and the document submission that we have significantly. And keep in mind, you got to keep these documents for 6 years. So the more straightforward we keep the document retention, it's probably worth the little extra effort to do the EZ form over the ask, even if you did have a $50,000 or under PPP loan. So what are those documents? Well, if we're just doing cash compensation, then let's run the payroll report. Let's make sure that we exclude the employer portion of payroll taxes. And only if we are requesting forgiveness for dollars that we put in for health insurance or dollars that we put in for retirement plans, then we've got to capture those transfers. If we are requesting forgiveness for the rent that we paid over the time period or the interest on the mortgage of a business property over the time period, then we have to retain those documents and submit them as well. Same on the utility side of things, but I think you're getting the story. Only the costs we're seeking forgiveness for do we have to justify. Again, that caveat is not part of the 3508S guidance, at least at this point in time. One of the things, as I mentioned before, we're likely going to use the business activity safe harbor for us to be able to use this form. That does increase, that is an area where I want to make sure everybody's conscious. Go out to the governor's office, grab the governor's website, grab the executive order that was the shelter in place. We just want to make sure that we document the business activity because it has to be related to guidance from HHS, OSHA, or CDC. Vast majority of governor's executive orders identified that it was due to the CDC's guidance that they are issuing this shelter-in-place mandate. So, something to just make sure you hop out there, grab it, download it, put it with your PPP files. Right now, you don't have to submit that, or per the SBA, you don't have to submit that with your forgiveness application. But in that 6-year document retention, in the guiding document around these forms, it does state that you need to have that available. So it's worth a couple minutes to go grab that. The other documents that you're going to have to retain, really anything that relates to what it is you were requesting forgiveness for, all of the PPP documents that you have, and then that highlight again there where it says using that business activity safe harbor, we got to justify the utilization there. And again, we've got to retain these for 6 years, so make sure you put them somewhere safe and hopefully we don't have to go back and revisit. All right, now here's the picture of the 3508 PPP forgiveness form. It's kind of gnarly, as you can see. Front page looks a lot like the EZ form, but because of the lack of exceptions that we're using, you might still qualify for that FTE full-time equivalency reduction. So if you use the original form, you're going to have to go through what's called Worksheet A and basically identify number of employees, what were they paid, what were the number of hours that they worked over that entire time frame. Now, if you are kind of stuck in having to use the 3508 form, want to remind you that there is a second safe harbor. That second safe harbor is that we went through and we fully restored salaries and hours paid prior to December 31st, 2020. Now, vast majority of offices I'm working with are back up, full staff, rocking and rolling. We've got the same count. Cool. We want to check that when we sign up for our application. Application for forgiveness. If, however, you are not back to full speed, but you will be by the end of the year, even if it's after your covered period, then you're still going to be able to use that additional safe harbor to achieve 100% forgiveness. Might delay our filing for forgiveness, but ultimately we want to make sure that you get as much of those dollars forgiven as possible, and we're being cognizant of how to kind of use these forms and use this system in a way that's going to work best for your personal financial plan and your practice's financial health. So again, the list of documents that you have to submit. In this instance, we still have that you don't have to submit documents for costs that you're not seeking forgiveness. And that kind of, the S is the one where you've got to put in all of the documents regardless of what you're looking to have forgiven. EZ and the original form, you only have to submit documents related to costs that you're seeking forgiveness for, which means you only have to retain those documents that you're seeking cost forgiveness for. So kind of goes through that same list that we saw with the EZ form. The documents to retain, again, very similar to the EZ form. I think it's interesting that you can also go through the full long process of filling out all of these worksheets, still check the business activity safe harbor, and then you'd have to keep those, and you're not going to kind of qualify for any of the reductions because of the FTE test. If you're checking the safe harbor for business disruption, then go ahead and use the EZ form. That's why it's there. That's why it exists. So again, quick primer. Those are the three options that you have. I know a lot of banks are coming online right now with their applications, their forgiveness application. Just a reminder, when you get to the end of your covered period, which is when you got the dollars plus 24 weeks, that's when we're going to be able to apply for forgiveness. You can even do it before then, but you don't have to apply for forgiveness until 10 months after the end of your covered period. They've had a couple of people reach out nervous that their banks are still getting this online and they're seeing the end of their covered period. You don't have to be anxious about it. Once your bank gets set up, make sure they've got the EZ form available for you, or the S form if you're using that one, but make sure that they have the appropriate form available for you. You don't need to be the first one there. Let somebody else kind of test what the bank system looks like. And then hopefully kind of this gives you an understanding of which of those forms you want to use, what are some of the documents you have to retain, what is some of the information that you have to prepare. As always, if you have any questions or if there's something you want us to cover in a future video, please shoot me an email, give me a call. I'll also include my Calendarly link in the emails as we circulate there, so if you want to hop on my schedule, it's going to be easy enough to do that. So hope that this has been informative. Hope you guys have a great day. Reach out with your questions. Thank you again.